What's good, folks? It's NightmareFrame here with a new Warframe video, coming at you with a look at the newly released Warframe, Citrine. Citrine is a Warframe that is all about crystals and geodes, basically fancy rock stuff, so a rock version of Gara. In this video, I will go over her kit, her rating, and how well she fits into Warframe, starting off with what her role is in Warframe. She is a utility support, all about providing allies with health and energy while also crowd controlling enemies, increasing damage done to them, and providing allies with an additional source of elements, boosting their damage even more if they're using mods like Condition Overload or Galvanized Condition Overload. At max level, she has 250 armor, 180 energy, 405 health, and 75 shields. They could have given us 6 less shields and 15 more health for an amazing meme. Come on, DE. You are this close. You farm her by doing the new game mode called Mirror Defense on Tiana's Pass. It's a time-based defense where you hold the enemy back from destroying a big crystal while you gather small crystal floating around the map. Easily done by 2 crowd control defensive frames and 2 Titanias flying around gathering things. Red crystal defense is on the Grineer side, and you go through a void interdimensional gate, gather more crystals to then defend the blue crystal on the Corpus side, and you just go and repeat that back and forth. Her parts drop on rotation C, and if you're unlucky with her drops, you can always buy her parts with the resource that's rewarded in the mission at the vendor OTAC, or just buy her straight up from the market. Now onto her kit. Let's begin with her passive. Her passive is visible on the bottom right corner of the screen, similar to frames like Nidus, Garuda, and Protea. This serves 2 purposes: to show her passive on the top half and her ability uptime on the bottom. Her passive grants her healing over time at 5 health per second. This healing over time increases every time she picks up a health orb at a rate of 0.1 and caps out at 25 health per second. She can pick up health orbs regardless of her health state, meaning you do not need to run synth fiber on your companion, and this synergizes really well with the mod Equilibrium for your energy income. This healing over time not only affects you but your allies as well, as they also get healing over time when they're within the affinity radius, and her passive works in tandem with her first ability, Fractured Blast. This is what provides you with a buttload of health orbs and not to mention energy orbs. Her first ability isn't for damage. Even though you deal slash and impact while bleeding enemies with minuscule amounts of DOT, what you're essentially doing is marking them for drops. This mark is displayed by a tiny crystal floating on the enemy's heads. As long as this crystal is present, once you or your allies kill these marked targets, they have a chance to drop health and energy orbs. Health orbs have a higher drop rate. What's even better is that this drop rate scales with ability strength. This is also a small crowd control, as it staggers enemies with its impact procs. Fractured Blast is also her Helminth ability. It feels like DE really has taken a liking with energy management abilities, as seen with the recent releases and reworks. You know, Nourish, Varuna's third ability, and now Citrine. I want you to think about that. Her second ability, Preserving Shell. This is a damage reduction ability that applies to you and allies, and the only ability that doesn't fit her in her kit. I will explain why. You activate this ability to give you a baseline damage reduction that scales with power and only goes up if enemies are killed while this ability is active, and it caps out at 90%. Only if you alone keep up with kills, and it will drop down if you're slow with kills. It is duration based, so with moderate duration it feels like it doesn't even exist, and she can't be bothered with so much duration if she has to sacrifice essential mods like range, power strength, and utility. So if you go in on duration, then an essential stat has to be sacrificed, or you're going to need additional mods to balance things out. Also, this damage reduction isn't reliable due to her need to keep up with crowd control so she can deal damage. And her 3 abilities, excluding her first, all have horrible animations, meaning they take too long to cast. As you're activating the abilities, you're getting shot at, and this horrible animation speed is what also hinders the upkeep of her second ability. Not to mention, this animation speed also feels slow with natural talent, and only starts to feel smoother when you add Matterize Power Transfer into the mix. It may seem functional in a group setting, but horrible solo. If this ability wasn't duration based and gave you a moderate baseline that doesn't scale with power strength but with kills, then it will be decent. As for now, it's not worth keeping. On to her third ability, Prismatic Gem. This is a turret of sorts. You summon a crystal that distorts elemental light, shoots out a beam that inflicts 4 elemental damage types: Toxin, Heat, Electric, and Cold, along with their status effects. It shoots at whoever you're attacking at. It does not activate until you physically hit a target. It will shoot its beams to one target at a time, and will only move on to the next target if it's finished with its damage on the first target. Allies also benefit from this ability, as they get their own instance of beams. This beam will also shoot through obstacles. You just need to have line of sight of the enemy and attack them. And finally, the fourth ability, Crystallize. This ability is the one with the slowest animation speeds. You summon seeking crystals that track enemies and encase them in crystallized formations, with protruding weak points appearing on random parts of their body. These weak point crystals allow your weapons to hit 300% flat critical chance. A reminder, you only get this buff on the weak points, nowhere else. Enemies that are crystallized cannot be moved by any other crowd control tool until the duration has run out or you kill them. Xmas units are not stunned but have weak points on their body. This ability is also a visual clutter on your screen, making it really hard to see anything. Please test these things properly before launching them, DE. Come on. And I'm using this with black energy to reduce how much glow they have, especially if you use it with any other color with moderate saturation. The ability tracking can go over empty spaces like dead zones to hit enemies on the other side. Also, these weak points are not headshot weak points, so you do not get the headshot damage multiplier, but still a high damage multiplier regardless. A tip with the fourth ability: AoE permeations like gas and electric do not trigger on the weak points. It needs to be a direct contact precision hit to gain the 300% crit chance. So prioritize weapons that don't require aiming but also are pseudo AoE. Examples like the Phantasma, Ignis Wraith, Latum, or Amprex. Alright, and now that we've gone over everything that you need to know about her, let's take a look at how we build her. Citrine is mostly all about crowd control, but lacks the most important thing that makes her kit better and powerful, and that's a grouping ability. I will showcase a build with different variations in Helminth, and even more basic version of a build that is more for the casual side. In terms of grouping abilities, we have a few great options, and each one has its pros and cons. I highly recommend Pull or Ensnare. Pull is great for long, narrow corridors, easy ragdoll, and you don't need to aim at enemies. Ensnare is best for more survivability, especially if you're in their faces. Gives you easy headshots and time to plan your shots accordingly. I do not recommend Coil Horizon because it is janky and has weird line of sight issues. And even though with a modded range of 31 meters, you don't pull as many enemies as you'd want, and you're left with a lot of units still shooting at you. Airburst has less range and requires more group spamming to get anything going. Larva will still remain to be one of the worst grouping helmets. It is the only one that isn't recastable until all enemies have died within its suction. It has low range and enemies can get stuck, having you waste your time tracking them down just to kill them, only to be able to cast your ability once again. Now, there is an interesting loadout with Xata's Whisper and Citrine. It's something that not many people would think of. For Xata to proc on the crit spot consistently, you need to directly hit the crystals to redirect all projectiles into the bubble-infused crystal. But that's the hard part if you're shooting into a bunch of enemies. But what if there's a way where your random shots can proc Xata onto the crystal weak spots with a decently high chance? And this is done with a high ricochet projectile weapon. And this synergy is with the Tenet Tetra and its 2 ricochet augments: kinetic ricochet and focused acceleration. Free damage multiplier with ricocheting bullets that shreds everything in its path. Alright, without further ado, on to the build. For my Archon Shards, I do have 4 Azure Shards that give me energy maximum, and this accumulates to a total of 380 energy without even modding for it. In the aura, I have Brief Respite. This is for the energy to shield conversion. Converts any energy from the ability I use into shields, helping me refresh my shield gate. Prime Sure-Footed for the knockdown and stagger resistance, because spending less time on your butt is a huge DPS increase. If you do not have this, use Handspring. I have Archon Stretch, Augur Reach, and a rank 4 Overextended to give me 250% range. This will increase the range on all of my abilities. Now, to counteract this negative power strength, I will be using Transient Fortitude. And now I have a total of 105% ability strength. And as you can see, I did lose some duration. Now, to counteract that duration, to balance everything out, to have a decent amount of ability uptime, I am using Primed Continuity. Now I have a total of 128%. And now for the energy management, especially when we use our first ability, I have Equilibrium. It converts health pickups into energy, and vice versa. And the increase in animation speed, especially when casting my abilities, so I don't seem like a slug, I will be using Natural Talent. And for additional defenses and survivability, we have Rolling Guard. The reason I'm using Archon Stretch is because my third ability will deal electrical damage and proc the status effect, basically giving me some additional energy income. For the Arcanes, I do have Molt Augmented for the 60% ability strength at max stacks. And of course, Arcane Eruption. Since we're dropping a lot of energy orbs, picking up this Arcane gives me additional crowd control. Shifting over to a more casual side of this build for players who are not really attentive to their shield break, what you can do is replace Archon Stretch with a regular Stretch, drop out Transient Fortitude and the rank 4 Overextended for the 2 Umbral mods, and replace Rolling Guard with Adaptation. Now you have some health with ability strength along with some damage reduction, and the aura can be literally whatever you want. This ensures you have some decent survivability for base steel path and moderate range for your abilities, paired along some decent health pull for some additional survivability. In terms of weapons, in the primary slot, I recommend the Phantasma Prime or the Ignis Wraith. I suggest these two weapons if you're running the pull variant of the build, because then you don't have to worry about precision hits. You just aim in the general direction of the clumped up enemies. For the Phantasma Prime, I am modding it for both viral and heat or viral and electric. Taking a look at the build. For my base damage, I am running Primary Merciless. Kill enemies and it stacks up to 360% base damage, so I don't need to mod for Point Blank. And to multiply my outgoing damage and double dip with damage over time, I am using the Primed Faction mod. Galvanize Hell for the additional multi-shots, Shotgun Barrage for the fire rate, and low rank viral, because viral isn't going to be our main source of damage. It is just there to debuff the enemy, so then my heat or electric will do more damage. And since this is the electric loadout, I do have Prime Charge Shell. Prime Ravage for the critical damage to multiply all of the damage when I crit, and guess what? We're going to be hitting 300% crit chance. Galvanize Savvy to add on to the damage and increase my status chance. Vigilante Supplies for the ammo mutation. And here we have our Ignis Wraith. As you can see, it is modded for corrosive and heat. 69% status chance. Nice. Taking a look at the build. Primary Merciless again as our base damage multiplier. It's almost a similar loadout yet again, but I am modding it for corrosive, and the Ignis has innate heat. And for the Ensnare variant of the build, I am using the Latum. My evolutions are as follows: Rapid Wrath for the fire rate, Lethal Rearment for the headshot reload speed because there's nothing else better to use, Incarnate Efficiency, headshots build up Incarnate form faster. When using Ensnare, it is a lot easier to land those headshots. And finally, Overwhelming Attrition. On hit that is neither critical nor applies status effect, gain a crit. Latum has a higher damage ceiling. Even though you're red critting, you're still going to be proccing this quite a lot, and you'll always have those 3 times stacks active. Taking a look at the build. Again, almost a similar loadout, but this time I do not have any crit mod, but I do have crit damage with Primed Target Cracker. Lethal Torrent for the fire rate and multi-shot, paired well with Galvanized Diffusion. Target Cracker and Sharpened Bullets are going to be my critical damage multiplier. And we have the 2 elemental mods forming Corrosive and Prime Heated Charge. And in the X-list, I do have Steady Hands for the negative recoil. Now, let's take a look at the Xata loadout. There are some similar mods, but with some slight variations. Brief Respite is still our aura, Prime Sure-Footed. We do have natural talent, but with the ability strength, I did decide to use Blind Rage, just so I can get a higher damage multiplier on Xata's Whisper. I did forego the additional range with Overextended in place of Prime Flow for the energy pool increase. With the Archon Shards and this mod, I get a total of 710 energy. And not to mention, with 199% Volt Augmented, I am guaranteed to drop health and energy orbs like crazy, a greatly increased chance. Even with this low efficiency, I do not have to worry about any energy issues. So I'm able to spam abilities if my shields break just to refresh my shield gate. Again, that kind of rhymed. And instead of Arcane Eruption, I'm using Arcane Acceleration for the additional fire rate on my rifles. And for the weapon, I am using the Tenet Tetra. This has bonus Toxin, so all I need is one elemental damage mod to form an elemental combination. Primary Merciless is my base damage arcane, again, and the loadout is quite similar to the other ones, but I am using two augment mods, Kinetic Ricochet and Focused Acceleration. Kinetic Ricochet is what allows my bullets to split up and ricochet off of surfaces and enemies, reprocking Xata's Whisper. And for this to travel even further, I need to use Focused Acceleration, which greatly increases my projectile flight speed. My focus school is going to be Madarai. The only reason I'm using Madarai is mostly because of power transfer. She needs that casting speed. Her abilities just feel way too sluggish. Hopefully DE does do something about this. Secondly, another great thing about Madarai is that we get Sling Strength. After a couple of Void Slings, you get 40% ability strength. Okay, so after playing with her for a bit, I do enjoy her, but she still feels a little bit clunky, especially with her ability animations. Otherwise, a solid choice for a Warframe. And with her current state, I would give her a solid B. Anyway, that has been it from me. I do hope you've enjoyed this video. And if you did, feel free to leave a like, share, and subscribe for more Warframe content streams and so much more. Do refer to the description. Thanks for watching, and as always, peace.